cocaine and blather.
Well, I needed a change in location and able to be able to do these things. Quite frankly, honestly, is I'm dealing with a lot of turmoil, like personal life right now, and I'm not going to go into it, but well, maybe I will. I don't know. Probably write a song about it one day, but gosh, instead of beers, we're drinking straight caffeine, coffee. Tonight it is Krispy Kreme. Yay. This is not too bad, but their coffee, cake up stuff. But deja vu, like I tried to record this already and it didn't quite work out, so here we are. Gonna be talking about chapter, what is it, 41. Yeah, that's sad, isn't it? I don't even know what chapter we're on. Chapter 41, Just Desserts. So, the music of this song, try to talk about that first, so in the order. And, you know, like, I was listening to, like, Alice in Chains, their Unplugged album, which is a phenomenal album. But at the end of the song called Frogs, they're just sort of like, I don't know, sitting there just ramping up for, I guess, their next song that they're going to cover. And Jerry Cantrell, you know, plays this like short little spoof kind of thing. And so that's pretty much how the intro to this song started for chapter 41, because it was me just giving a nod to Alice in Chains, but what they were doing was they were spoofing this like David Alan Grier skit from In Living Color back in the early 90s, where he plays this character named Calhoun Tubbs, who's this old man, you know, this like failed blues singer, and it's a pretty like hilarious skit. I mean, it was like a recurring character on that show, and you know, he reprised that role like 4 or 5 different times, but like the first time it's classic. So I was listening to the Alice in Chains thing, and you know, for years I've whenever I would hear that song, I'd sort of be like, that sounds familiar, that, you know, but I just couldn't put my finger on it until I was just like, well, let me see what like Google tells me or whatever. And you know, I guess some like Reddit thing came up, and it was like, oh, it was the In Living Color skit. So like I thought like the intro would be cool, kind of spoofing the spoof, you know, whatever. I guess that works. But yeah, you know, it's not to both of those things, but also kind of plays homage to Black Sabbath as well, like like specifically War Pigs. I designed the da-da stab as homage to them. So yeah, that's the intro, and other than that, the song would, I just wanted it to be heavier, more power chord sort of driven stuff, I guess. Just low end most of the way, and just influenced by sort of beat down hardcore kind of stuff, whether it's like newer school kind of beat down. I'm a big Knock Loose fan, and also a pretty obscure, unknown current band called Moral Slip out of the UK that, like, they're very, very similar to Knock Loose. They've kind of got their own spin on it, but I listen to them a lot at the gym. Like it's good lifting music, so cheers to that. And we'll talk about the literal meaning of the song, which, to understand that, so 80% of the song is told from the standpoint of the Master Bates character, and the end of it is a dialogue of sorts between him, Parson Brown, and the protagonist. So what happens in this song at the beginning, this is starting, really directly after the last chapter, chapter 40, and so, like, last chapter they're in this church service thing, and we're dealing with mainly the catechist and the protagonist in that chapter. And so this chapter, Master Bates he gets up from like the back row at the end of this church service or whatever, but to him all of it is a joke, because unknown to anybody else, he is a true nihilist to the nth degree. Nihilist to the extent of like amorality. Like that's one word. Like he's an amoral person. So like he tells some of his, like reveals some of his own personal backstory, which he states that at one time he was pretty much like the leader of a village where he lived at, but he was usurped by a woman there. So he almost, I guess, has this like sense of sexism even to him because of that. But he's basically wearing too many hats by trying to. He's really just trying to survive, and thus, like, he's deceiving the people around him, especially the tribe, and so they don't like know that he's a nihilist. They think that he's like a believer just like them. So he leaves this church service pissed off and thinking, Christianity and religion in general is just a joke to him, and just horseshit, as he calls it. And he basically goes on a rampage. And trigger warning here, like, I don't necessarily say things directly. There's a lot of figurative language and just weird language in general, and I'll kind of explain that in a second. But he basically does a bunch of horrible stuff, like reference to, trigger warning, prison rape, and he's just like practicing orgies, and there's a lot of sex and stuff without like going into like specific occurrences or whatever. But he basically tells you, the listener, that he's doing all this crazy shit. He's murdering people. He's just like a very violent person, and he's getting his hands on pretty much any drug he can get his hands on and just tripping balls, and doesn't see any problem with it, doesn't care. Like, this isn't about like addiction or anything like that. This is about somebody who legitimately does not care about their well-being or like anybody else's. They just don't care. And so like he's destroying property, and even like kills a guard and basically steals their clothes to, I guess, impersonate them. And he also like in the middle of the song, there's this kind of like real slow, heavy part that starts doing a crescendo, just slowly starts building up faster and faster. And that section of the song is him like reading from a personal diary that he keeps. And like on his like rampage, he takes time to sit down while he's just high as balls and write in this diary. But like it also gives more of his backstory, that he was usurped and imprisoned to begin with because like he killed his lover. And so like he says that like he's literally talking shit to his dead lover in this like diary letter entry sort of thing. And meanwhile like kind of listing some of the things that he's doing and just continuing to rampage. But like despite all the like messed up stuff he does, he feels no lasting pleasure towards any of it. So at the end of the song, or towards the end, he comes into contact again, just like during his rampage, just wandering all these different like sections of the prison, and he runs into the protagonist and Parson Brown, who are just walking around kind of minding their own business. And he emotionally tries to destroy Parson Brown, because he knows that like Parson Brown like physically is inferior, because Parson Brown is, at this point, I guess you could say like he's elderly. I mean, not like to the degree that he's like a 90-year-old dude, but like Parson Brown's been around for a long time, and couldn't necessarily like physically, you know, fight back or whatever. And so like the fact that Master Bates is just high as a kite and nihilistic and like does not care. He sets out to emotionally destroy Parson Brown. Meanwhile, Parson Brown actually has a moment of empathy towards Master Bates and tries to encourage and implore him to you know, to not just be like a moral person, but you know, to I guess like remember who he is, like his identity in Christ or whatever. But you know, the problem is that, well, Master Bates is a nihilistic psychopath, and I don't say psychopath lightly, you know, like he literally has no empathy towards anyone or anything whatsoever. So at that point, the protagonist has to like step in and realizes that like there's no reasoning with this guy. So like they get into a physical altercation together, you know, just Master Bates and the protagonist. And the protagonist is much stronger. He's swole, as they say, and he beats the shit out of Master Bates, and Master Bates has to retreat and disappears altogether. And you know, I think it's safe to assume from this, the end of the song, that like they pretty much come to consensus, you know, at least at the very moment that it's over with. You know, the protagonist and Parson Brown together basically recognize that, yeah, this Master Bates guy's kind of like no longer in the tribe or whatever, or so they think, I suppose. But either way, Master Bates, he retreats and he's gone and he's off doing his own thing. And that's literally everything that happens in the song. So, caffeine. Talk about like the spiritual stuff that, you know, I've hidden in every song in one way or another. And for this one, the fruit of the Spirit that I put in is patience. And like, you know, as I've said before, one thing that I saw, you know, being Eugene Peterson's The Message, he rewords, or rather defines, patience as, you know, being a willingness to stick with things and refusing to avenge one's self. And so we'll talk about that a little further on, but there's that, and then like the amoral step that, you know, like this is me talking sort of thing, that I see as, you know, I guess problem in society, or, you know, a step towards where this is going, but like an amoral one. And I put in here that this one sort of has written in the rejection of right to privacy, but it's almost like a flip side of that coin, that with that is also the withholding of information, that like information on things that should be commonplace or like open source, I suppose. So it's like there is a right to privacy, and an amoral step is the rejection of that. But like the flip side of the coin really is that like you withhold vital information, and that's what Masturbates does in this song. And specifically, he's been doing it all along since he like joined up with this tribe. As like a matter of like using them for his own ends and protection and whatnot. So going directly into like the personal meaning of the song, you know, I originally planned to name this song "The Great Equalizer." It's just kind of like a side note, you know, piece of information, but you know, I didn't think the title fit in with the lyrical content whatsoever. So like, anyway, this song, you know, as I've said plenty of times before, you know, I don't like violence. I don't like confrontation. But this is like, this is like the penultimate, you know, example of when that like violent confrontation is completely necessary. And you know, unfortunately, we live in a world where some people are so messed up that force and power is the only thing that they'll ever understand. And you know, going back into the word with patience, you know, refusing to avenge oneself, well, some people could take that as, you know, meaning, you know, pacifism altogether, but I don't see it that way. Because like the idea of not avenging yourself doesn't equate to like I'm not allowed to protect those that I have loyalty to, and the people that I love, and maybe just people in general. So like looking at my notes, excuse me. Yeah, it's protecting others from like others' abuses and their lack of empathy. So it's nihilism versus just revolting against nihilism. So I also have in here, you know, ideas of like societal revolution. And I think a lot of people who would watch this would have like certain ideas when it comes to the term societal revolution, whether we're talking about like some sort of Marxist thing or no, none of that. It has nothing to do with that, but for me in this song, it's one of the like, I guess, hidden meanings, or rather like sort of what this song is an allegory for, is that I personally think that like the social contract itself, the very like fabric of society is being revolted against or rewritten, changed, however you want to word that, through like technology and technological advance, and that these advances actually force change of social contracts. So like the artwork that I created for the liner notes of this song deals with, you know, it's all AI based. Like I used, oh crap, I can't even remember the name of the app on my phone. But you know, I used this app on my phone that I think plugs directly into like the Midjourney AI image creator, whatever. And so I, you know, used I used, you know, split up the like phrases and sentences and words of this song and use that as the writing prompt, and you know, pick like the best images to illustrate this song, because it to me is kind of like this allegory of sorts for AI technology as like a form of societal revolution. So there, you know, I'm a big comic book nerd, and there was this independent comic that like started coming out about a year ago at this time called The Abolition of Man. It was like one of the first, if not the first, commercial AI generated comic book. And what like there were only 5 issues of it, or 5 or 6, and I can't keep up, but I'm pretty sure it was 5 issues. The first issue, and why they called it The Abolition of Man, was the like main creator guy. He was a visual artist, and he's also like a legitimate philosopher. You know, has like philosophy degree or whatever, like masters in, you know, existential theory or something. I don't know, but pretty smart dude. He plugged in C.S. Lewis's, like a bunch of excerpts from C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man novel into the Midjourney generator, and made the comic book from that. And so like each comic book, and then, you know, has like a QR code to like lectures, or like the two main creators, and maybe they have a guest or whatever, but they talk about the comic book, and they talk about the philosophy or what have you of the technology itself. And I say all that because in the lecture, in one of the comic lectures that, you know, with the QR code and stuff, they were talking about some British philosopher of like technology, a guy I never heard of, but this guy apparently, you know, wrote a philosophy book. You know, it's what philosophers tend to do, right? But they were citing this guy, and like how he listed that throughout like human history there's been, I don't know, like 7 different societal revolutions that take place. We're not talking about like some sort of Napoleonic thing, or we're talking about like technological revolutions that changed the fabric of society on a grand scale. And one of the ones that I remember, being listed, obviously, being the Industrial Revolution, and that, okay, like, we're all products of the Industrial Revolution. We've all, like, our lives are, supposedly easier because of a lot of those things. Even if you're a farmer today, well, you've got all kinds of different equipment that you can use, machines and whatnot, that will make your life easier, supposedly. But I guess what they were kind of questioning is, well, what of, like, the actual farmers at the time of the Industrial Revolution beginning? That, like, it was all manual labor to them, and we think now, like, oh, that makes life easier and stuff like that, but the revolution is, if you're a farmer at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, then that might kind of take away not just, like, potentially your career, but maybe even, like, part of your purpose in life. Something I'd never really thought about before, that it literally changes the very fabric of society. And so this guy was saying that, like, AI technology is doing the same thing, but predicting that, this may be, like, one of the final revolutions for humankind, because, like, think of it as existentialism, or pretty much most existentialists say that, mankind has to determine their own meaning, or that it, like, starts with yourself, sort of thing. You start with yourself, start with your own, like, morality, and kind of move outward. Existence precedes essence, and all that sort of stuff. But this philosopher guy was essentially saying, hey, we may be coming to, like, the end of that thought, that maybe, like, meaning and purpose and things like that are something that mankind is no longer able to find with themselves, if AI are able to do just much better at, we're not talking about, like, some sort of Terminator Judgment Day sort of level stuff. We're talking about, like, okay, if, put it this way, like, talking to my best friend, like, actually, like, last week, about this stuff. There was apparently, like, AI software for, like, flight simulators, that they taught this AI software how to, navigate this flight battle simulator. So they sent in, like, a 30-year Air Force veteran or something like that to battle this thing. And, in, I don't know how many simulations they played out, but the guy couldn't even get a shot on this thing. This guy's, like, got 30 years in service, and they gave this, like, AI, I don't know, like, a week to learn how to fly, and now, and I mean, to so many of us, that's, wow, that's incredible, that's exciting, but we're talking about the unintended consequence here of, like, well, we've just made Navy pilot or Air Force pilots or whatever like obsolete now. You know, guys who have spent their entire lives doing this stuff, and yeah, that might be a poor example because we're talking about like war essentially, but like AI art, you've got in the comic book, like did they interviewed as part of their like supplement thing, you know, the QR code. They interviewed this artist, can't think of his name off the top of my head, but like he did a lot of the covers for the Neil Gaiman's original Sandman series, you know, and this guy's art's very distinct and unique, and in a matter of a couple of months, Mid-Journey had made this guy's art for him, basically. And so the revolution, they were saying, is that like now we've got AI that can create art for us, and it's a democratization, you know, sure. But, you know, what about the artist who has spent years and years and years honing their craft, and now a computer can do better than they can? You know, what about like getting a living from making art, you know, that sort of thing. And so, I mean, that's what I wanted to sort of deal with allegorically with this song. So yeah. I have written here that, yeah, I need to point this out. Like, a lot of people say that AI will, in the long term, destroy jobs and yet make things better, but it's just the unintended consequences that I think one of my primary issues with it, because obviously I'm not a Luddite, I think the issue is that it, as a technological revolution, becomes this tyranny of itself, because it's like people say automatically, well, you have to just agree with this new contract, this new social contract, without having any say in it whatsoever. And so this song is an allegory, kind of, is the resistance of the individual against, you know, the personification of these things, how necessary it becomes not to just blindly accept what somebody else says that you have to accept just because they say it. That, you know, there is a value in having questions on these things. And that, like, resisting may not appear very nice at all, but may very well be, you know, the difference between like freedom and subjugation. So then when it comes to like personal meaning, I also think of this song maybe symbolizing to a lesser degree people who are so toxic that like there's no use in even trying to listen to what that person has to say whatsoever. Like, you cut them off, and like any move they make, even to reach out to you, is like becomes a sign of aggression, sort of thing. You know, I've I've had a lot of fallouts with people over the years, and I've only had one out of every single person I guess I've ever met, one person that I'm like, no, I'm not letting this person into my life, back into my life whatsoever, under just, no. Like, you stay over there, it's your life, do whatever you want to, but don't even think about coming over here. One person who was an ex-business partner of mine, and I think that like the Master Bates character is much 100 times worse than this ex-business partner, but it kind of becomes a metaphor for that, like indirectly in my mind, because you just come across somebody who is so toxic and so manipulative that you can't negotiate with terrorists, sort of thing, you know. Like, it's so rare, because I mean, I about a year and a half ago had like someone who like betrayed me deeply, like used to be a best friend of mine, and like just betrayed me deeply. And this person reached out to me, and you know, like a year and a half ago, we exchanged, you know, our side of the story from things that went down years and years and years ago, butted heads for a second, you know, on it. But at the end, I truly think like we both came to, you know, a mutual understanding, I guess. And are we friends again? No. But like, we're at peace, and like I told this person, you know, like if and when we run into each other again, I would hope we would both be able to, you know, say hello to one another and shake each other's hands and be at peace with one another. And that's what I want to see happen more, is this sense of peace. Yet I'm saying there's one person where I'm like, I don't even know if that's a good thing, because like the person is so toxic and manipulative that, you know, this business partner dude, even if he came across as like, oh, I just want to be friends again or whatever, I don't trust that. I don't trust that his intentions are pure, and that he's not just trying to use me and basically swindle me into another trap, I guess, a business trap. So some people, it just is what it is. And then there's a bunch of lines towards the end of the song, specifically that Master Bates is throwing at Parson Brown, that I think truly kind of represent, you know, this kind of like inner darkness inside me. You know, the little voice in your head that says, you know, no one will love you or whatever, you know, and subsequently like having to rebel against that voice. So then to go through very quickly with like the references that I use. There's a line that says "gilded dusty woman" that references Fleetwood Mac, "Gold Dust Woman." Line "bless this mess." I think I've used that one before, but references to Dance Gavin Dance and John Miss, their vocalist, his zany lyrical style of writing, which, you know, I wasn't copying, but like definitely was sort of aiming towards in a way with this song to be less direct and more visual or whatever. There's a reference to robots with human hair. It's another Dance Gavin Dance reference. There's a reference to Strix in this, which is that's a reference to the like TV show story of The Strain, which my best friend got me into like earlier in the year. It's a vampire show essentially, but it's the word Strix references like Greek myth and essentially this like story of Boyos, I think was his name. It's like a story of like a mother and sons turned into these like bird owl-like creatures that signal omens, and they feed off of human flesh, and it was a punishment from the gods because, you know, this like mother and son did like cannibalism or whatever. There's a reference to Orgy Porgy, which is from Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It's basically, to kind of sum it up, it is like this meeting of 12 people, drug-induced, like ice cream. They eat ice cream that's got drugs in it. They chant together, you know, this like praise towards Henry Ford, and because like in that world they see him as like a version of a higher power of sorts, and then all of this is like to emulate like a religious ritual, which ends with them all like having sex together. So I referenced that. More from like C.S. Lewis, The Abolition of Man. Man's final conquest has proved to be the abolition of man. I think this was from it too. Nature, untrammeled by values, rules the conditioners, and through them all humanity. Man's conquest of nature turns out, in the moment of its consummation, to be nature's conquest of man. Which that was like, I didn't like have that directly quoted or whatever, but like it is kind of like indirectly referenced in the song. And there's a phrase in Call, which I'd never heard of it until I was watching The Strain, which it's this like rare thing that happens when a baby is born still within the amniotic sac. And like in the show, they saw this as like, oh, this baby is very, very special, and that was used in this kind of to, you know, represent the same thing. I reference Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man in this, but that also is in reference to Vitruvius, who was this Roman architect, who basically said that all buildings need to have strength, utility, and beauty. And, you know, he was like the original proponent of, you know, there being like perfect proportions in architecture and within like the human body. There's a word used, anhedonia, which is this like inability to experience pleasure from activities which people usually find enjoyable, and it's a Greek word. Says in there in the song, "Made love to the abyss," which that's a reference. Once again, I've used it a million times, I think, referencing Friedrich Nietzsche, and it's his way. Not Nietzsche, but Master Bates's way of saying that he has embraced like becoming a monster. There's reference to effective individualism, which is marriage through personal selection based on romantic and sexual attraction instead of like economic and political ones. There's reference to Ephesians 4:1, as a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received, which that's Parson Brown uses that line. And okay, yeah, in this song, to be like the opposite of the fruits of the Spirit, to like show this you know how bad Master Bates really is it has in through it from Galatians 5, the works of the flesh, sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like this. So all of that is talked about in the song in one way or another. Which, oh yeah, the message has like really interesting ways of like kind of rewording or redefining, not really redefining, but anyway, Eugene Peterson like says, repetitive, loveless, cheap sex and a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, and a lot of those things, like I ended up using lines from the message to kind of make reference to the works of the flesh, and stuff like that. So I think that's this one's been long enough, and I need more caffeine. So next, I guess we'll talk about chapter 42, and we'll continue from there. Cheers.